I spent days in silence after discovering the truth. My grief had been replaced by something sharper, something colder, rage. I realized I had two choices. I could remain the broken widow they believed me to be, or I could become something else entirely, someone they never expected. I began with quiet observation. I listened more carefully whenever Clara visited. I watched how Daniel spoke on the phone. They had grown careless in their confidence. They believed I was powerless, and that arrogance became my weapon. I remembered the advice Richard once gave me. He said the strongest strike is the one your enemy never sees coming. So I smiled when they visited. I nodded when they talked about bills. I pretended to be grateful. All the while I took notes in a small journal I kept hidden under my mattress. Every transaction, every date, every word. I wrote it all down. I traced the paper trail from my accounts to theirs, and slowly a map of betrayal unfolded. But revenge is not only about facts, it is about timing. I needed them to feel safe. I needed them to believe I had accepted my fate. So I played the role of the weak old woman. I asked Clara to drive me to doctor's appointments. I let Daniel lecture me about budgeting. Each performance made them trust me more. At night, I researched quietly. I visited the library instead of using my home computer. I asked discreet questions to bankers and neighbors. Piece by piece, I learned how they had transferred the property, how they had funneled the money, how they had lied. And while they were busy enjoying the comfort of my stolen house, I was busy sharpening my plan, a plan not just to expose them, but to make them choke on their own greed. I told myself over and over, this isn't just revenge, this is justice. And justice, when served cold, lasts forever. The day I chose to strike was ordinary for them. Clara had come over to brag about the renovations she and Daniel planned. She wanted to turn my garden into a patio. She laughed as if destroying Richard's roses was a casual detail. Her cruelty fueled my resolve. I began with the bank. I carried my journal and every copy of the documents they had left me. The banker who once knew Richard looked through them carefully. His face tightened when he noticed the forged signatures. He leaned forward and whispered that what Clara and Daniel had done was not just immoral. It was criminal. From there I went to a lawyer, a kind woman who listened to my story with patience. She read the papers twice. She asked me only one question. Are you ready to fight? My answer came without hesitation. Yes. The lawsuit was filed quietly. Neither Clara nor Daniel suspected a thing. They still believed I was broken and blind. They still believed I was grateful for their help. They had no idea every smile I gave them was a mask. I also spoke to neighbors, old friends who had known Richard and me for decades. They remembered how Clara never visited until after his death. They agreed to testify if needed. The community that had watched me grieve was now watching me rise. The first letter from the court arrived at their house 2 weeks later. Clara called me in a panic. Her voice trembled. Mom, what is this? I let silence hang between us before answering. It's the truth finally catching up to you. Daniel stormed into my apartment the next day. He shouted about betrayal. He called me ungrateful, but I looked him in the eye and said nothing. Silence was my sharpest blade. Step by step the case unfolded. Every lie they had told me became evidence. Every dollar they had stolen became proof. And for the first time in months I felt something powerful again. Control. The courtroom was colder than I imagined. The air smelled of paper and old wood. I sat quietly in the front row while Clara and Daniel whispered to each other nervously. They looked smaller than I had ever seen them. The judge listened patiently as my lawyer laid out the evidence, the forged signatures, the bank transfers into Daniel's account, the sudden change of deed ownership. Every detail was laid bare under the fluorescent lights. Clara tried to cry. She said she only wanted to help me. She said she never meant harm. But the documents told a different story, and the judge wasn't fooled by her tears. Daniel grew angry. He called me vindictive. He claimed I was punishing them for moving forward. But the room went silent when my lawyer asked him why money meant for my care had ended up in his private account. He had no answer. In that moment, I felt a shift. For months, I had been the victim. Now I was the one holding power. I looked at them and felt no pity. They had taken my home, but I had taken their peace. The ruling came swift and clear. The house was to be returned to me. The stolen funds were to be repaid, and both Clara and Daniel faced charges for fraud. Their faces drained of color as the words echoed through the room. I walked out of the courthouse with my head high. The sun felt warmer than it had in months. I imagined Richard walking beside me, proud, Neighbors greeted me when I returned to the old street. They cheered as I stepped back onto the porch. The roses still bloomed, and for the first time I could breathe again. Revenge had not erased my grief, but it had restored my dignity. It had shown me that betrayal, no matter how deep, can be answered. And sometimes justice and revenge are the very same thing. Thanksgiving was supposed to be about family, about gratitude, about remembering the people who mattered most. But that year, the air around the table was heavy, almost hostile. My son Daniel sat at the head. He carved the turkey like he was the new patriarch of the family. My daughter Clara leaned closer to him. She whispered something in his ear and then cleared her throat. "Mom," she said. Her voice was sharp enough to slice through the clinking of forks. "We've all decided. It's time we cut you out of this family." For a moment, silence blanketed the room. My grandchildren froze mid-bite. Their eyes darted between me and their mother. Daniel smirked, as if this had all been rehearsed. I should have felt devastated, maybe even broken. But instead, I laughed, low, steady, almost amused. "Is that so?" I said. My hand slipped into the handbag beside my chair. My fingers brushed the thick envelope I had prepared for this very moment. "Well, in that case, I brought something for all of you." Confusion spread across their faces. Daniel frowned. Clara grabbed the envelope first. She tore it open quickly, maybe expecting a last-minute plea for forgiveness, or maybe another check, as usual. But it wasn't money. It was something far more devastating. The color drained from Clara's face as she scanned the first page. Daniel snatched it from her. His eyes widened in disbelief. He flipped through the stack of documents in silence. Their comfortable world was unraveling right there, between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce. "You can't do this," Daniel stammered. His voice cracked. "Oh, but I already have," I replied. My voice was calm and steady. That Thanksgiving night they thought they had cut me out. But in truth, it was me who had cut them out. And to understand how we got to that moment, I need to take you back 6 months, back to the day my world shattered. My world shattered 6 months before that Thanksgiving night. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning. My husband Richard was out in the garden tending to his roses. He had always loved those flowers, red climbers along the back fence, yellow ones near the porch. He said they were living proof that beauty came from patience and care. I was inside making coffee when I heard the sound, a crash, a thud that didn't belong in our peaceful backyard. I ran outside, and there he was, lying on the ground with pruning shears still in his hand, his eyes staring at the sky. And in that instant I knew, he was gone. Richard and I had been married 42 years. We had raised 2 children, built a life together inside that old house. And in one heartbeat it all ended. The roses kept blooming, but my world stopped. The funeral passed in a blur. Relatives came with casseroles and condolences. My daughter Clara handled the service arrangements. My son Daniel greeted guests like a polished host. They seemed so strong, and I thought to myself, maybe I raised them right. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I feared. But the evenings told a different story. When everyone went home and the casseroles went cold, I would sit in Richard's chair and stare at the empty space beside me. The silence was deafening. I tried to read, but the words slipped past me. I tried to sleep, but the bed felt too big. I had lost my husband, and with him went the rhythm of my days. Clara came to me 1 week after the funeral. She sat at my kitchen table and held my hand. "Mom," she whispered, "you can't stay in this house alone. It isn't safe. It isn't practical." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say this was my home. But my grief was too heavy, and her voice was too certain. That was the beginning of everything that followed. Clara's words about safety and practicality lingered in my mind. She came almost every day after Richard's death. She brought groceries. She made tea. She spoke softly as if I were a fragile child, and in my grief I welcomed her presence. Then one evening she arrived with Daniel. They sat across from me in the living room. Daniel carried a stack of papers under his arm. Clara squeezed my hand. "Mom," she began, "we've been talking. You can't live here anymore. It's too big for you. It's too lonely." Daniel leaned forward. He slid the papers onto the coffee table. He tapped them with his finger. "These are the sale documents," he said. "If we sell the house, you'll have more than enough to live comfortably. You won't have to worry about maintenance or bills. You'll be free." My heart sank. That house wasn't just walls and bricks. It was 42 years of my life. It was where Richard carried me across the threshold, where My children took their first steps, where every photograph on the wall told a story. And yet, in that moment, I was too broken to fight. I signed the first paper that night. My hands trembled, but Clara smiled with relief. Daniel patted my shoulder. They acted as though they had saved me. In the weeks that followed, they kept pressing. More forms, more signatures, bank accounts were moved, titles were transferred. They told me it was all for my benefit, and I believed them, because I wanted to believe them. By the time the house was sold, I was living in a small rented apartment on the other side of town. The roses Richard loved so much were gone. My kitchen was half the size. My furniture barely fit inside, but Clara said it was temporary. Daniel said it was logical, and I clung to their voices because I had nothing else left. What I didn't realize then was that I wasn't being cared for. I was being stripped, piece by piece, of everything Richard and I had built. At first, I tried to accept the small apartment as my new reality. I told myself it was practical. I told myself Clara and Daniel knew best. But deep inside, something never felt right. One afternoon, I went to the old neighborhood. I wanted to see the roses again. Even if the house was no longer mine, I thought maybe the new owners would keep them alive. But when I turned onto the street, my heart stopped. There was no for sale sign. There was no moving truck. The house looked exactly the same, except it wasn't strangers who came out the front door. It was Clara, and behind her was Daniel. They were laughing together, carrying grocery bags into the very kitchen that had once been mine. My kitchen. The truth hit me like a blow. They hadn't sold the house. They had taken it. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. My daughter waved when she noticed me, as if nothing were unusual, as if I weren't standing there betrayed. Mom, Clara called cheerfully. We didn't expect you. You should have called first. I forced myself to smile. My hands shook as I clutched the strap of my purse. Daniel stepped forward. He blocked the doorway like a guard. This is better for everyone, he said. Trust us. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the small kitchen table in my rented apartment. I stared at the empty walls. I replayed every word, every smile, every signature I had given them. They had tricked me. They had stripped me of my home. And worst of all, they had no shame. The next morning, I began searching through the paperwork they had left me. Hidden among the copies was a financial statement, and that's when I saw it. A transfer of funds not to me but to Daniel's account. Clara's name appeared on the deed. My grief had blinded me, but now my eyes were open. And once you see betrayal clearly, you cannot unsee it.